I'm Jonathan Keaton, and right beside me is Michael Wood, and welcome to 1497 Podcast.
And we've got you covered with news from the entertainment world, intriguing interviews, everything to do with sports, and of course, we're going to make you laugh along the way.
And I want my damn respect too.
Yo! Welcome back to the lovely podcast with numbers in front of it. That's called 1497 Podcast. It's your boy, Jonathan Keaton. And right beside me is the greatest co-host to ever walk the planet, Mr. Wood, a.k.a. the Woodster, a.k.a. Woody, a.k.a. Mr. Wood, the man, the myth, the legend, Michael Wood!
Yo, what's up, John? How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Well, not great. Had a couple car problems, car issues here and there, but I guess other than that, my day's been good. But that took up a little bit of my day. Kind of lost some nap time, which I was looking forward to because after this, I have nonstop schedule. But I'm doing pretty good. Let's get into it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Nap time is always good. You always got to hit the snooze button, but sometimes the snooze just got to wait till the night, baby. So what we got? What we got today?
Yeah. So first thing I want to kind of bring up is, just because it just happened, I was seeing things about it. How do you feel? So LeBron and the Lakers came back from down 12 with little over 6 minutes left against the Jazz, and Quinn Snyder after the game, literally he called LeBron the GOAT. How do you feel about opposing coaches? Because this isn't the first time someone's called LeBron the GOAT after losing to him. How do you feel about opposing coaches pretty much saying that, making an excuse and being like, there is no way we would beat them. They have LeBron. Because that's basically what he said. He's like, sometimes you just can't stop him, which is true. But at the same time, he's basically saying the reason we lost is because they have him, not because I didn't do it. I did things I shouldn't have done or something like that. So how do you feel about kind of, I guess, making an excuse that the other team's player is just too good?
I think there's a couple different ways I'm going to go with this. And the first way I'm going to go with this is it's a compliment towards LeBron. It's like LeBron is so good and our team is so talented that one man can take down five. That's basically what he's saying. He's like, I can't draw up anything to stop this man, LeBron. LeBron's going to do what he's going to do. And hopefully his other teammates try to pick up their slack along the way for him to win. But Quinn Snyder was basically saying, like, okay, we can't stop LeBron because LeBron is so great at what he's been doing his whole longevity of playing basketball. So I don't mind that because sometimes one player can outplay five, and we saw that yesterday with the Jazz game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just wanted to see how you feel because I saw people like ESPN posted it, and people were kind of saying like, oh, he's just saying that because they lost. But I mean, sometimes literally there's just some, like even Giannis is a guy who nowadays is so tough to stop sometimes, and you really, no matter what you do, he's going to score. I just wanted to get that out of the way. And well, we're on the NBA. But let's talk about that Eastern Conference and more specifically the Boston Celtics, who are on a tear currently. They were 22-20, and now they're 36-22 or something. They are going crazy right now. Thoughts on the Boston Celtics and their chances in the East?
The Celtics are really shocking me right now because I'm a big hater on the Celtics, and the reason why is they're so inconsistent when it comes to these types of games, right? They go on a 5-game winning streak, and then the next thing you know, within like the last 10 games, they go 2 for 7. And then they would go on another hot streak again, and then they would repeat the same thing. Listen, what the Celtics are doing right now is really good. They're playing the talent we've seen from that Celtic squad. It looks like it's coming together. It looks like something might actually happen in the playoffs, but we can't really attest to that until the playoffs happen. So I think this streak, because they lost to the Pistons, I think they lost to the Pistons the other day, but they're on were they on an 8-game winning streak or were they on a 9-game?
They were on a nine-game winning streak, and they in their last let me see if I can do quick math here. In their last 16 games, they are 12-4. So they're on a pretty hot streak right now.
Yeah, so going into the All-Star break, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, anyone on that Celtic squad, you're feeling good. You're like, man, once we start playing competition, because that's what the second half of the season for most teams are, trying to solidify themselves in like that playoff race to other people. If they're able to beat that competition and play like they did, especially against how they did against Philly with the James Harden, then they should be a real conversation on can the Celtics win the East.
I agree with you. And they made two really big acquisitions that not a lot of people talked about because they were kind of more focused on Ben Simmons, James Harden. And you and I, we were victims of this. They got Derek White, who's a really good guard, and then Daniel Tice, who's been in Boston before. And he's not a guy that when you think Daniel Tice, you're like, oh, this guy, he's going to lock down Joel Embiid. Like he's not a guy that's going to do anything spectacular for you, but he does a lot of the little things, and so does Derek White. Both these guys are huge additions to this team. And I believe they also got, if I'm correct, Bull, not that he'll play. But no, like you said, we might start to have to seriously talk about this Celtics team as a contender in the East. And that's crazy to say because currently the top 6 seeds in my eyes, and even Brooklyn at 8, are all contenders in the East. So there's about 7 contenders right now, which is ridiculous for the Eastern Conference. And the Celtics are seriously becoming one of the teams that we're going to have to start to look out more for because we kind of wrote them off early in the season.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And one thing I wanted to bring up is the game before the Jazz, the Knicks played the Nets without no Kyrie, no Kevin Durant, no Ben Simmons. Nets were down 28, then they were down 16, and they came back and won. How do you feel about the Knicks right now?
They are horrible. They suck for lack of a better term. They are not good. They're so bad. This is funny to me. I'm looking at the scores of their last games right now. They lost the Thunder in overtime on Monday. As I look at the thing, the Thunder 127, the Knicks 123. The logo for the Thunder is obviously the Thunder logo. Logo in front of the Knicks is the Portland Trailblazers logo. I'm not sure why. People just literally do not care about this team because they suck. They are not good. And listen, we thought this team was going to be like a 5 seed going into the season, maybe 5, 6, 7. I mean, come on. No one thought they were going to be the 12 seed behind Washington. I mean, when you look at this team, you think like, oh, they got guys they got Julius Randle, who was just an all-star, had a huge season. R.J. Barrett, who I believe is going to end up being a star in this league. Evan Fournier, who lit up the Olympics. D. Rose, who we know what he can do. Kemba was supposed to be amazing, and he's only averaging 11. And then, yeah, I mean, this team it didn't mesh together like everyone thought it would, including myself. And clearly that was on full display when they lost to the best Curry brother, Seth Curry, and blew a huge lead. It was embarrassing for them. I'm assuming it was embarrassing because I believe that's the second or third 20-point lead that they've blown this season. So, yeah, Knicks stink.
Yeah, the Knicks they're just terrible. It's just like I feel bad who's ever a Knicks fan right now and has to sit there and just watch them play great first half basketball and terrible second half basketball. It's awful. Speaking of basketball, though, the Rutgers, they always find a way to become sleepers in the Big Ten and the whole NCAA. So my question to you is, are the Rutgers the biggest sleepers in the Big Ten?
See, that's a tough question because when you look at the Big Ten, it's one of the better basketball divisions or conferences this season. Not the best, certainly not the best, but it's one of the better ones, shall I say. Rutgers has been climbing, man. They were really low. They were below Iowa, below Michigan, below Indiana, below Penn State. They were they were ahead of Penn State for the whole season, but they've climbed the ladder. They're currently the 5th seed in the Big Ten. They're 10-5 in the Big Ten, 18-7 in total, or 16-9 in total. Pardon me. And they are one of the best teams at home at home in college basketball. But if I had to give a sleeper team, and I think this might just be because my roommate is a huge fan of this team, but I think I might have to go with my sleeper team being Northwestern just because they were pretty hot. I know they lost two now, but I think Northwestern's a team that can always make it interesting. But Rutgers, listen, I would agree that Rutgers is a sleeper team. I'm just playing a little bit of homer, I guess, picking Northwestern because Rutgers against top 25 teams is 5-1. That's second best in the Big Ten, behind only Purdue. So you tell me what that means. They're definitely a really good team, but the homer in me just wants to say Northwestern. I would say Nebraska if they weren't 1-13 in the Big Ten. But yeah, Rutgers is probably the easy sleeper team because for some reason people still aren't talking about them, which is weird because they're definitely prepared to make some noise.
Rutgers is mine, but since you brought up another one, because like Rutgers has been throughout all the years of Rutgers basketball, they always find a way to stay in the conversation, whether it's in the Big Ten or in March Madness when that's coming up. And being 5-1 against top 25 teams, that's just proving to you that this team can play when competition goes against them. They just beat Illinois. Pretty sure they beat Michigan. They almost beat Purdue. It's
They
like
beat Ohio State.
Beat Ohio State too. So it's just crazy how this team can compete against top 25 teams when it's thrown their way. And the Big Ten is really, excuse me, the Big Ten is really good this year because if you look outside of Rutgers, you have Northwestern, which we talked about them being a dark horse of the Big Ten. You got Indiana, you got Iowa, so many good teams. But my other sleeper team in that little conference is Indiana. I don't think a lot of people are slipping off Indiana a little bit, but they got a big win earlier in the season against Purdue. Tracy Jackson Davis, always get his name mixed up, has been balling out this season. Give me once. He's been balling out this season. And then Rob Finney, especially in the game against Purdue, and against Purdue, balled out too. They have a lot of great guys on that squad that can make some noise. And I think they could make a way or pave a way towards the Big Ten championship. So it's going to be exciting Big Ten basketball. But Rutgers and Indiana, those are my sleepers. I can't find it. All right. Anywho, let's see. We got. Oh my God, it lagged.
Yo.
All right. So, so I think I turned off my hotspot, and then it just went haywire because AT&T's internet is bad. But Indiana and Rutgers are my sleepers in the Big Ten. So what else we got to talk about today, man?
Yeah, I just want to finish up on that sleeper talk. I wasn't being serious about Northwestern. I think I don't really have another one, but I think Indiana's a good pick. Just because they're a team that can always win big games. We know what they can do. But Rutgers, all the teams that are ahead of them in the Big Ten, they beat recently, and they have a chance to beat all 5 of them in a row if they beat Purdue on Saturday. So Rutgers is definitely a team to watch out for, and Indiana too. But in all seriousness, any team in the Big Ten can pretty much win at any time outside of Maryland, Nebraska, and I guess that's it. But now let's talk about a little bit of football. But let's first focus on the 2 stars for the Super Bowl losers. Joe Burrow, we'll talk about him first. Actually, we can talk about Joe and Jamar. Where does Joe rank among QBs, and is Jamar Chase a top 5 wide receiver?
I think Joe Burrow ranks 6th amongst QBs right now. And the reason I say that is he had a chance of being top 5, and that was him winning the Super Bowl. And he didn't quite perform up to an elite level in the Super Bowl, but this year, he was sixth in passing yards, had the best completion percentage in the NFL. He was eighth in touchdowns. His performances in the playoffs just speak for themselves. 75.7% passing the ball, 348 passing yards, one interception against the Titans, against the Chiefs. In the regular season, he had 446 yards, 4 touchdowns, 76.9 completing his passes. And then in the playoffs against them, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 60.5% throwing the ball. Against the way you weigh your top 10, or the way I weigh my top 10, is how guys perform in big games in the regular season and big games in the playoffs. And in the playoffs, we didn't expect him to go into Tennessee and do what he did against Tennessee. Tennessee is a pack where they got, I think, 3.2 sacks per game with their offensive line. We're thinking Joe Burrow is going to get sacked all the time. He's not going to be able to play efficient football. Then the Chiefs, they blitz all the time. We don't think that Joe Burrow is going to be able to throw under all that pressure. And then in the regular season, over 500 teams, he was 4-3. So it's not like ta-da, but he was able to get the wins that they needed for the playoff push. But on the road, he was 5-2. So I think that's a respectable spot to put him in, because like 6 through 8 is like guys where they can move up, but they have to show more to move up. So I think 6 is the right spot to put Joe Burrow.
Before I give my spot, who are your 5, and in what order are above him?
My 5 is first Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford, and Justin Herbert.
All right, so we have the same 5, same top 5. Joe Burrow, man. Well, we have the same top 5, except I have Rodgers, Mahomes, Allen, Herbert, and then Stafford. I got Joe Burrow at number 7. And number 6, you're gonna hate this. Number 6 is Lamar Jackson. I think we kind of forgot he got hurt. That team was the number 1 seed in the AFC. This man gets hurt, and they don't make and they weren't the number 1 seed like the second week. They were the number 1 seed like in week 12. And this man or week 11 or week 12, and this man gets hurt, and they miss the playoffs. That's ridiculous. That should never happen. I mean, you saw the Titans lost Derrick Henry, and they still finished with the 1 seed. So Lamar going down really proved to me just how good he is. Because that team was performing with Lamar, and without him, quite frankly, they just weren't. So Lamar's at 6 for me. And then Joe Burrow. Listen, I think anyone in the world can agree with us on this. He's not better than Aaron Rodgers. He's not better than Josh Allen. He's not better than Patrick Mahomes. And if Tom Brady for some reason comes back, he's not better than Tom Brady. He's not better than Deshaun Watson, even with all Deshaun's problems going on. But I'm not going to put Deshaun or Tom in this list. And then we look at we look at Herbert and we look at Burrow, because I think we can rank Stafford above Burrow just based off the fact, I know his team's better, but just based off the fact that Matt Stafford beat him in the Super Bowl. And not only did he beat him, Matt Stafford outperformed Joe Burrow. He threw 2 picks, but if you really think about it, one was dropped, and the other one was on 3rd and 14. So he was just chucking it up for grabs. So really, his 2 picks were not that bad, and they weren't really game changers. And then Joe Burrow only threw 1 touchdown in the Super Bowl. But we look at just pure numbers. Herbert is way better than Joe Burrow. I mean, quite frankly, his team just isn't as good as Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's offensive line is way worse, but Joe Burrow's defense is way better. Herbert had to put up a lot of points in order to try and win games. So yeah, Herbert and the Chargers put up 474. The Bengals put up 460, and that's like not a huge discrepancy, but then their defenses, Bengals allowed 376, Chargers allowed 459. So the Chargers had the worst defense in the AFC. and they almost made the playoffs. So I think that says a lot about Justin Herbert. And if he gets a defense, he's going to be really scary. So I think just for that reason, I got to put Justin Herbert, and also second worst defense in the league, in the entire league. So the fact that they were almost in the playoffs is a testament to how good Herbert is. And right now, I think those 6 guys just have I think 1 through 3 have a big edge, but then 4 through 6 just have a slight edge on Joe Burrow.
I like the point that you brought up about Lamar, because that's how you kind of look at like performances on how that player was doing that season, where you remove that player from that team, like God forbid injuries, but like say if that player gets injured like Lamar and has to miss games, then you look at it as, okay, were they performing good because of him, or were they performing good because of other reasons? And the way Lamar was playing this season, keeping his team in games with the amount of injuries that they had as a whole, was absolutely amazing. So I don't have a problem with him being high on your list. And then with Justin Herbert too, it's like some of those guys, or Justin Herbert is a guy where he can sling the ball. And that's been known ever since he's came into the league. So I think for Joe Burrow to get up more, he has to do what he did in the playoffs, in the regular season, against these teams, because that's ultimately what's going to happen, right? He's going to go up against these juggernauts. He's going to go up against the top of the top on a daily basis. And if they don't get an offensive line, that's off topic, but if they don't get an offensive line, then it's going to be done for Joe Burrow unless he can put up those numbers and still get his team's wins on top of that.
Yeah, and just another thing on Lamar Jackson's performance with a stat to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
They were 8-4 with Lamar Jackson. 8-4. Do you know what they finished as?
What they finished at?
Finished 8-9. So they lost 5 straight games without Lamar Jackson. And I mean, that says it all right there. To his importance, to all the people that are doubting him. But to another person that got doubted early in the season, but not so much as of recent, Jamar Chase. Is he a top 5 wide receiver?
No. I think we need to get a hold of ourselves, because it's too early to put a label on Jamar Chase being a top 5 receiver, because we're forgetting about all these other receivers that were injured. I mean, you're telling me, I'm not saying you, but like some random person walks up to you and goes, a healthy DeAndre Hopkins, Jamar Chase is better than. Tyreek Hill, when he's playing at his best football, his best capability, Jamar Chase is better than. Cooper Kupp, Triple Crown, Deebo Samuel, even Justin Jefferson or Mike Evans. Like, I don't think, like, don't get me wrong, Jamar Chase as a rookie had a phenomenal season, but he has to do that again for us to be like, we need to shed some light on this conversation of him being top 5, because I think we had this conversation before where we talk about all these other guys. Like, there's so many great wide receivers in the league that if they're all healthy, it's hard to match up against. Like, look at DeAndre Hopkins. Kyler Murray's numbers with DeAndre Hopkins versus without DeAndre Hopkins is absolutely abysmal. Like, you would think that DeAndre Hopkins has made Kyler Murray into the quarterback that he is. And then the conversation we had before with Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford, and how much Cooper Kupp helped out Matthew Stafford, Deebo with Jimmy Garoppolo, Justin Jefferson with Kirk Cousins, so on and so forth.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. Just by listing out wide receivers. No, in no particular order: Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson. Those are 4 guys right there, and then you have one fifth spot for either. I'll give you Jamar. You have a 5th spot for Jamar Chase, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Deebo Samuel. Who else is there? DJ Moore, Adam Thielen, even. Can't even think. Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb. There's just so many wide receivers in the league. Terry McLaurin, I would take Terry McLaurin honestly over Jamar Chase. There's just so many guys in the NFL at the wide receiver position. I think the only thing that most people can agree on is that your top five has to include Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, and Cooper Kupp. I guess and Justin Jefferson. That fifth spot is wide open. But personally, Jamar Chase he's not the one that fits that hole. I don't know who it is. I just know it's not Jamar Chase.
Yeah, and for people that try to argue with his stats, I mean, his stats are good, but if DeAndre Hopkins played a full season, his stats would be the same. If Patrick Mahomes didn't get off to a bad start and Tyreek Hill was able, because I think Tyreek Hill missed a couple games and he was injured while playing it, his stats would almost be the same. Like, I'm not making excuses for these players because they have shown that. So he needs another season, and next season, there's going to be a lot of deciding factors for the Bengals as a whole. So that next season's a really big season for them.
Yeah, and I just don't think you can rank someone top five at their position after a rookie year unless they're so good it's undeniable. And Jamar Chase was so good, but he's missing that extra so I can't give it to him. Next up, a little bit more NFL. Which wide receiver two is gonna emerge into a superstar next year?
But Gabriel Davis. Now I got another guy because I feel like a lot of people are thinking I'm going bias here. But Gabriel Davis, I mean, had one of the greatest playoff performances as a receiver in all time. And Josh Allen too, but this conversation is not about Josh Allen. I mean, 8 receptions, 201 yards, 4 touchdowns, most touchdowns by a wide receiver in the playoffs in NFL history. You need Stephon Diggs didn't do his thing. Stephon Diggs didn't get his revenge tour. But what that game showed to myself, other Bills fans, and other people watching that is this wide receiving core is only going to get better. Cole Beasley's always going to do his thing. Stephon Diggs is always going to do his thing. But then you have that question mark on who's that third guy to make this trio elite. Because look at the Bengals. Outside of Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd can do his thing, and T. Higgins can do his thing. Tyler Boyd, since that third down catch, that was his only drop, or his third down drop, that was his only drop of the season. We know what those guys can do. We know what Cole Beasley can do. We know what Stephon Diggs can do. If Gabriel Davis, this is the door. When you open the door and you see a whole bunch of light, baby, and you see someone start walking out, you see the shadow, that's going to be Gabriel Davis. I think Gabriel Davis is going to emerge into that wide receiver 2 role, and he's going to fit just fine. And another player that I had is Mike Williams. Mike Williams had a big consistency issue, and he was battling some injuries too, so that played a part in it. But, I mean, 1,146 yards, 9 touchdowns, and you average 71.6 yards per game. I mean, as fantasy, he might be a good flex for next year, or a good wide receiver 2 for next year. And we know in the offense that the Chargers have, it's a pass-heavy offense. So when you're focusing more on Keenan Allen, Mike Williams showed that he can be that deep threat guy for that Chargers offense. So I got to go with Gabriel Davis and Mike Williams.
Yeah, so when I look at all the wide receiver 2s around the league, and I try and determine which one of them is going to progress into being a star, one name came to mind, and you said it, Mike Williams. He started this season and looked like the best receiver in the league. And he's still a young guy. He put up 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, and like you said, he was inconsistent. So if that's him being inconsistent, I can't imagine what it's like for him being consistent. Keenan Allen's getting older, so Mike Williams and Justin Herbert are going to grow up together in the league. So Justin Herbert's going to try and create a bond with Mike Williams. Not that he won't try and create a bond with Keenan Allen, but the bond with Mike Williams, I think, is going to be stronger just because they're closer in age. If he can be consistent, this man might be a top 10 wide receiver because that's how he played the first few weeks of the season. So Mike Williams has a super high ceiling, and I think he might reach it, or he has a super high ceiling, and he's going to get close to reaching it next season because he might still have more in the tank and might continue to progress. But I think Mike Williams is that guy that's going to make a huge leap next year.
Yeah, I can't wait for next season. Next season is going to bring a lot of questions that are going to be answered to the table. So next season is going to be great for a lot of teams in the NFL. And since we're speaking about teams and we're speaking about quarterbacks, a lot of people have a problem with Matthew Stafford being a Hall of Fame quarterback. So it's time for us to talk about how should we rank Hall of Fame quarterbacks?
Yeah, so the thing is, I think what Matt Stafford did this year proves pretty much everything wrong about like winning is all that matters. Because the last time the Detroit Lions won a playoff game, Matt Stafford was 3. When you think about that, it's like this organization has had trouble winning for almost 40 years. This team has had trouble winning, so you can't really blame it on Matt Stafford for not getting the job done. It's more of an organizational thing. I think you got to look at stats as much as like sometimes it's well this guy, the way he transcended the game was ridiculous. This and that. I mean, Tom Brady, the greatest of all time, has every passing record. We call him the GOAT because he has 7 rings. But if he had 7 rings and had the stats of like Jacoby Brissett, are we calling this guy the GOAT? Probably not. So actually, 100% we're not calling this guy the GOAT. So I think stats is the only indicator because one thing's been true and will always be true. It's that the numbers don't lie. So if your numbers are good enough, like Matt Stafford's are, where if you look at Matt Stafford's numbers, you can say he's probably like the 14th best quarterback of all time. I believe that's where his numbers put him. I don't know if I completely agree with that, but when your numbers say that about you, I think you do deserve a spot in the Hall of Fame. And a guy like Eli Manning, he has a 50, like his career was 500. He was 500 in his career, but he has 2 Super Bowls and arguably 2 of the toughest Super Bowls to win. He beat an undefeated team that was on pace to be the second undefeated team in NFL history. So I think we gotta, because people don't also take into account playoff success. So I think playoff success is going to be another thing that needs to come into play. But overall record, I don't think, like when you're in the playoffs, what you do in the playoffs should matter. And Matt Stafford, I think, proved that. So if a guy continues to go to the playoffs and doesn't come up, then that's one thing. But Matt Stafford wasn't even really going because his team was so bad. So I think we look at numbers and then success once you're in the playoffs.
I hate how people look at it and they go, Matt Stafford's team was so good. Brady's team, every Super Bowl that he won had a top 10 defense. So is Brady just not a Hall of Fame quarterback then? And then they go, well, Brady's numbers and his resume is bigger. Well, let's look at this. Matt Stafford is 12th in career passing yards. He's 12th in passing career touchdowns, 53rd in passes intercepted. And Peyton Manning, Dan Marino, Brett Favre, Johnny Unitas, Drew Brees, Eli Manning, Dan Fouts, John Elway, and Broadway Joe, a.k.a. Joe Namath, 9 quarterbacks I just named are in the Hall of Fame, are all top 20 in career interceptions. Let's keep on going down this list. Matthew Stafford, 4th in career passing yards per game in his career. Completion percentage in his career, Matthew Stafford, 63. Better than Eli, Rich Gannon, Dan Marino, Roger Staubach, Bart Starr, Dan Fouts, etc. All Hall of Fame quarterbacks. If Stafford, because he had 3 playoff wins, so if the Rams are somehow the wild card next year and they win 4 straight games, he'll have 1 less playoff win than the 4-time Super Bowl champion Joe Montana.
Wow. You know what else? What else is kind of crazy about that? We look at all-time quarterback rating, right?
Mm-hmm.
We got guys: Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Drew Brees. You know who number 4 is? Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is number 4 all-time in quarterback pass rating. Then we got Tom Brady, then Tony Romo, then Steve Young, Peyton Manning, Philip Rivers, Matt Ryan, Kurt Warner, Big Ben, Derek Carr, Joe Montana, Matt Stafford, Carson Palmer, Andy Dalton, Alex Smith. So you keep going down that list, but career passer rating, I think that's pretty much how good of a quarterback you were. Like that's the stat that determines how good of a quarterback you were. And I'm not saying Kirk Cousins is the fourth best quarterback ever, because there's other things that need to play into that, considering the fact he's only played 125 games. But Matt Stafford has played the same exact amount of games in his career as Carson Palmer, a guy who I don't think is going to be a Hall of Famer, but honestly, I would not really care if he was, because I think he was a pretty good quarterback and was severely underrated. Matt Stafford, in the same amount of games, has 500 more passing attempts, which equates to 3,700 more yards. You can do the math on that, but 300 attempts for that many more yards, that's kind of a big deal. His completion percentage is better. His interceptions, Matt Stafford, same amount of games as Carson Palmer, has thrown 26 less, has thrown 29 more touchdowns, and then obviously he's got a better passer rating. So if you just look at like Matt Stafford, his career games played, Carson Palmer is a pretty good quarterback. Matt Stafford, everything other than yards, he blows him out of the water. It's not even close. So I don't know. When we talk about the Hall of Fame, like you said, you got to take into playoff success, and then you got to also look at stats, because you can't just completely discredit them. I mean, so some God, as I'm looking at this, all-time completion percentage. Take a gander who number 2 is.
Who?
Kirk Cousins. This man's ridiculous. No, but and then number 3 here is Matt Ryan, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But I mean, you look at stats, most of the time, almost all the time, you look at the accumulation of all of them, and you get a pretty good indication of who the best players at that position were, especially when we're talking about quarterback.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then 2 more things I'll say about this. So it's 2 quick things. One, I don't think Pro Bowl should matter in a Hall of Fame conversation, because me and you both know it's a popularity contest. Like throwing Pro Bowls in my face, it's like throwing how much money you make in my face. Like no one really cares about that. They care about how did you perform in certain settings? How did you bring that team and ultimately bring that team to where it was? How did you do all that? And what did you do? What did you do? And another thing I was going to say is Richard Sherman saying the Hall of Fame is like at the lowest of the lows right now. Devin Hester, the greatest special returnman of all time, is not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Like what?
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. And if you change the way, if you're the best ever at your position, regardless of what your position is, like if you're the best punter ever, you're the best kicker ever, you're the best long snapper ever, for all I care. If you're the best to ever do it at your position, you're in the Hall of Fame. You should be first ballot, because Devin Hester is going to get in the Hall of Fame, but now he's not going to be first ballot, which not that really anyone's going to care about that, but I think Devin will. I mean, that's a big deal to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. First year you're eligible, you're in the Hall of Fame, and he's a guy who clearly deserves it. And unfortunately, he's just not going to get it. He can't get it now, the first ballot Hall of Fame. So, like I said, I'm taking into account stats mainly for quarterbacks, because other guys, like they've done other things like a Devin Hester or like a Devin Hester who's done multiple things. Honestly, like Cordell Patterson, who's a player who is like a multi-tool person. He's probably one of the best to ever play like this. But what position would he get into the Hall of Fame if he is eventually at that stage in his career? Like, you can't be like, I mean, I guess you could say special teams, because he's one of the best special teams players ever. But I don't know. I think they really need to fix how they look at the Hall of Fame. And personally, if I was one looking at it, quarterback would probably be the easiest. Every other position is when it gets really hard, because some players just have that it factor. That's hard to deny. But quarterback, I think, is an easier thing to get right. So hopefully they get it right when it comes to Matt Stafford.
Yeah, I hope so too. I really do. Speaking of other quarterbacks that have performed at the level of Matt Stafford, minus the Super Bowl, Mr. Matt Ryan, a guy that I love to defend in Atlanta because ultimately Falcons fans are giving it up, and a lot of people are saying Matt Ryan is washed. So is Matt Ryan the issue in Atlanta?
He's not the issue. He's definitely not the issue, but I don't think it's Matt Ryan time any longer. I think his time is up. If I'm being honest with you, he had his one of his worst passing seasons as far as yardage, and the season was longer. He like you just look at his numbers: 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. That's just not very good. It's plain and simple. It's just not very good. He he just doesn't do it. He doesn't quite do it anymore. And it's not like he's the problem, but he's definitely not the answer. You need a young guy. They have a team that, how it's constructed, this team is not a Super Bowl team. Sure, they might make the playoffs somehow, but it's definitely not a super team or a playoff team. Sorry, or a Super Bowl team. Sorry, I keep mincing my words. But the longer you keep around an old quarterback, the harder it's going to be to eventually rebuild and get to the stage you want to get to. He's had a great career, and I don't know if it's over yet. I just think it should be over in Atlanta, if I'm being honest with you. Because I look at a guy like Joe Flacco, who he kind of stopped performing, and then they put in Lamar Jackson, and we saw how that took off. And not saying that the Falcons get a Lamar Jackson type player, like a guy who can completely change your team, but I think it is time for Matt Ryan and the Falcons to split ways.
Matt Ryan from 2011 to 2012, or not 2012, from 2011 to 2020, threw for 4,000 passing yards every single year within that gap. The last time he threw for 3,000 yards was 2010. The last time he threw under that was his second season in the NFL. And then the last time he had 20 touchdowns was 2017 when he threw for 4,095 yards. I don't think Matt Stafford's time is done, but
You mean Matt Ryan? You said
or
Matt.
yeah,
Sorry.
Matt Ryan. That's what I meant to say. I don't think Matt Ryan's time is done in Atlanta. I don't think Matt Ryan is slowing down because we would have saw a huge drop off in his passing numbers from interceptions and touchdowns. I mean, touchdowns, he threw six more the season before, but he only threw one more pick this season. And then if we do, give me 1 second here. If we do like the mass, little quick mass real quick, and we look at his season from last year and his season from this year, he only threw 613 more or 16. He threw 613 less passing yards. So like, is that really a big drop off? I don't think it is. And then if you look at other problems besides that, because he was 11th in passing yards and he was 13th in completion percentage, which isn't terrible. And then, but on the flip side, he was sacked 40 times. That's fifth on that list. Falcons allowed 2.4 sacks per game, and they allowed 131.9 opponent rushing yards per game. And Falcons had the lowest sack percentage in the league. I think they need to address the issue, and they need to get a defense. And that's this draft right now is a great draft to do that. So hopefully they can do that. But I don't think his time is done yet. I don't think his time is done yet.
Yes. So you said he's not showing any signs of progression, and I disagree with that. This is his lowest amount of passing yards per game since his third season in the NFL. So he has not had this low of production in a very long time. And the last time he threw only 20 touchdowns. Last time he threw only 20 touchdowns, he was still throwing for almost 250 a game. This season, he's at 230. That year, his passes were nearly 8 yards per pass. This year, they're at 7. His touchdown percentage that season, or his interception percentage that season, was higher than it is this season. So I mean, I guess he's to some degree a little bit outperformed that 2015 year. But listen, Matt, as much I like Matt Ryan. I do. I like Matt Ryan, but the older you get, the more you can expect to get worse unless you're Tom Brady or LeBron James. But his time is done because if it dropped, his pass yards per game this season dropped off 53 from last season. So if that happened this year, I can only imagine what's going to happen next. Ooh, voice crack. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next year? And you're right. This is the draft to get a defense. It's also the draft where you can get a young quarterback, maybe late developing, like a guy like maybe not necessarily Kenny Pickett, but like Malik Willis. Like there's going to be quarterbacks available because this isn't necessarily a quarterback heavy draft. So QBs will be available, and maybe you keep Matt Ryan another year, develop a quarterback. But I think this is the year you finally go out and get your future quarterback. Maybe not necessarily start him, but you get a future quarterback.
Two more things I'll say is I think if he performs the way next year like he did this year, then we can talk about him regressing, because right now it's just a thesis that we can make, right? It's just a claim statement. And then the proof of the claim statement is going to be how he performs in the next season, right? And then the next thing I'll say is Tom Brady had a lot of help. Now, that's not discrediting him as a quarterback and his greatness, but if Tom Brady was on, let's say Tom Brady just made a bonehead decision and went to Atlanta, you think his numbers would still be the same if he went anywhere else besides Tampa Bay that had the assets like Tampa Bay? He would have regressed too.
Well, I for one don't think Julio would have left. And you're right. They lost like some people, but I do think his numbers would have been not. He would have thrown 12 picks with only 20 interceptions, or he would have thrown more than 20 touchdowns, and he might have thrown more than 12 picks. You know, Tom Brady in his late years here has been kind of a gunslinger, but I think he would have had a better year. He definitely would have looked a little bit worse, but I think Matt Ryan had a good year last year, so this season kind of makes it look like he jumped off a cliff. I know it's not necessarily that bad, but it's very rare that quarterbacks, when they get older, can perform at the level Tom Brady was able to. And Matt Ryan might be, because he kind of has a similar play style to Tom Brady in a way. So we'll see. And I like that you were using English terms like claim statement and thesis. So for that, I'll give Matt Ryan one more year.
Matt Ryan, I'm gonna need you to go crazy, baby. And shout out, I'm a journalism major. Like I have to throw some English terminology in there from time to time. But that is the end of our episode. If you want a little tutoring on your next English assignment, you know where to hit me up at. Anywho, subscribe to our podcast on all podcasting platforms and YouTube. Like and comment geez Louise, like and comment on our videos on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at 1497 Podcast. We will be back on Monday. Hopefully it's some good college basketball game Saturday. And we're getting close to the madness, baby. We're getting close to March, Mike. Come on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's get it.
Yes, sir. We out.